Well, hi there, South Fellowship Church. This is Ryan Paulson, and we're coming to you with a video on Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 through 21, and I want to talk about a very specific topic, but just got done teaching this Sunday morning on this text, and man, I hope you're loving this series on Life is Amazing, and because I'm really enjoying teaching it. So listen to what Paul writes to the church at Ephesus, and here's what he says. He says, "Look carefully then how you walk," or live. That this is sort of a way of them saying, a moniker for saying this is how you're living. But notice he wants us to be careful. He wants us to spend some time on this, because we don't want to walk as unwise, but as wise. And you have to look at this carefully because it could be easy to slip into the path of unwisdom. And he says, okay, making the most of every opportunity, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. So he said that's one of the things that wisdom looks like. It's making the best use of time. Therefore, verse 17, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And what we said on Sunday or today was that God's will is wisdom. That's the argument that the Apostle Paul is making. Be wise, right? And because that's the will of God. Now, he's already given us one example of what that looks like, making the best use of time. And he's going to give us a second one here in verse 18. And do not get drunk on wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. Now, that's an interesting term, one that is often this idea of being filled with the Spirit or baptized in the Spirit or sealed with the Spirit. You may be aware that there is no small debate amongst followers of Jesus about what that means. So here's what I want to do. I just want to spend a few moments unpacking for you what does it mean to be filled with the Spirit? How do we go about that? And how does that differ from being baptized in the Spirit or sealed with the Spirit? So here's the chart I put up on Sunday morning. If you were here, if not, this is new, and that's okay. We have this passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. There's a number that we could choose from, but I think that this one is fairly succinct and gives us a good idea of what this topic of being baptized with the Spirit means. And listen to chapter 12, verse 13. It says, "For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body. Jews or Greeks, slave or free, all were made to drink of this one Spirit." So as you look at this idea of being baptized or sealed, you could say that this is the way that that people gain entrance into the church, that it happens for everyone who's a follower of Jesus, and that it happens one time. They drink of this Spirit. Now, so we have some contrast here. That baptism from the Spirit and filling with the Spirit. Baptism happens once, and then filling can happen repeatedly. You can see this in Acts chapter 4, where Peter's filled in order to preach with boldness. And we'll see that down here too. But he's empowered to do something. Secondly, what you'll find is that the baptism or the sealing of the Spirit never happens before Pentecost, and that's Acts chapter 2. But the filling of the Spirit does happen. Bazaleel is one of the people who designs the tabernacle. And so he's one of the people doing construction, and one of the very first people to ever have said that the Spirit's filling is in them. Isn't that awesome? I love that. It's not the priest, it's actually the architect, the construction worker, the designer. It's great. Okay, baptism, as we said, is true of all. That was made very clear in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. However, in contrast, the filling of the Spirit is not true of all. In fact, Christians are commanded to be filled. So implicit within this command is the realization that you can be a Christian and not be filled, All right, baptism of the Spirit is not always experienced. It can be, but it's not always. And the filling can be experienced in the ability to step into the calling of God in unique ways. Baptism can't be undone. Look at 1 Peter chapter 1. That's a great text about the sealing of the Spirit. But filling can happen and then can be lost. So it can be both. Now, this is really important. The sealing of the Spirit, it produces a position, a standing with God, right? So we are children of God. We are seated in the heavenly realms. We've been made holy by His blood. We've been forgiven of sins, etc., etc., etc. But the filling of the Spirit is more about power. It's about the ability to step into a situation and have the fruit of the Spirit come out of us. So this is Galatians chapter 5. And don't think situation like something special, but just everyday life. We bear the fruit of the Spirit because we're led by the Spirit, and we're led by the Spirit because we're filled with the Spirit. So let me sort of draw it this way. The filling of the Spirit always leads to the leading of the Spirit, which always leads to the fruit of the Spirit. And so that's the difference. It's really important as we read through the scriptures. We can get off pretty easily, and I think it does some damage when we do, where we start to assume that if someone's sealed with the Spirit, that they're going to be automatically filled with the Spirit. That's not the case. That's not the case. So when Paul writes here in Ephesians chapter 5, be filled with the Spirit, that's what he means. And you can see that he goes on to say that it influences the way that you address one another. So it's this like horizontal. It changes the way you interact with people. That you sing and make melody in your heart to the Lord. So that's a vertical, like we worship God. And finally, giving thanks. That's sort of an internal, in your heart, in your soul. The Spirit's work affects all of that. And so God's concerned with our wisdom. He's with walking in the way of wisdom, making the best use of the time, calendar, and influence. And then filled with the Spirit, soul. He wants a healthy life in every way, shape, and form. All right, I hope that helps. A little bit longer than usual, but I hope you found it interesting. May you be blessed by God as you study His scriptures and walk in His way with His heart. All right, see you next week.